if the Saints lose and they lose in a really horrible fashion, we could be seeing Alvin Kamara as well as a couple other Saints players in different uniforms.
We've got another star-studded guest. You guys asked, and now you shall receive. You said, hey, Rick, can you pop up a New Orleans beat writer for me? I said, absolutely. I dialed it up, went over to the SI.com wishing well, and got Kyle T. Mosley. What's happening, my man?
What's going on, Rick? How you doing, man?
Doing great. Good to see you, man. Nice to see you healthy here on the Football Playbook, making your debut, man. So happy for that. And I can't believe we're 8 weeks in and we haven't had you on the show. I guess it's because the Saints and the Eagles haven't matched up, but they might link up for a little bit of a trade scenario. And, you know.
Yeah, that would be huge.
Huge,
especially
right?
with the Who Dat Nation, man. To lose Alvin Kamara would be quite an understatement, you know?
Yeah, I do. And I saw yesterday on this timeline, Alvin Kamara tweeted out the Michael Jackson popcorn. He's kind of sitting back and watching, it looks like. Maybe there's an inkling here more than we may know. I'm not sure what you're hearing, Kyle, but I'm going to tell you the two scenarios that I've heard.
Okay.
And you tell me what you think. And then I'll give you a kind of third-party perspective where I think they could meet in the middle. But I'm hearing that the Saints would like their first-round pick back, which is currently the number 3rd overall, looking like a top 5 pick. And, I understand, Alvin Kamara is one of the top running backs in the NFL. Now, he does have a little bit of a pending legal issue, and I'll ask you about that here in just a moment. But I'm hearing the Saints want their first-round pick back. I don't think Howie Roseman is going to do that deal straight up. I've heard that Howie has offered a second-round pick plus Quez Watkins. So I don't think that's enough to get it done either. I'll give you my ultimatum where I think they can meet halfway in the middle. I think the Eagles have to give up their first-round pick, which will probably be a late first-round pick, and a player. I would give Andre Dillard the tackle and or Kenneth Gainwell. I would start off by saying you could have Dillard or Gainwell, but if I'm the Eagles and it took Dillard and Gainwell plus my first-round pick, I'm so all in after the Robert Quinn trade, sitting here undefeated in week 8.
Yeah.
That's what I would do to get the deal done. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. How real is it?
Well, those are possibilities. Mickey Loomis has always been the type of general manager that kept his ears open, right? He always listened to offers, as well as the Eagles have been really friendly with the Saints in terms of they have a history of making trades together, right? So losing Kamara, being able to say we would give up Alvin Kamara, who is their most dynamic offensive weapon at this time, would really account for possibly a couple of first-round draft choices for the New Orleans Saints. Or it has to be someone of significance for them to be able to trade that number 1 as well as another player like you mentioned. But when I think about what Mickey Loomis would be considering is that he can't let Alvin Kamara go for less than at least one top draft choice of the Philadelphia Eagles. It has to be a minimum of that, plus another draft choice or a player as well. So what's really another motivating factor for New Orleans is the fact that every year they're in cap hell. And they find a way to be able to maneuver through it with Kai Harley, who's the VP of football operations. He's done a tremendous job being able to reset some of these contracts for the New Orleans Saints. So when you look at Alvin Kamara, what he brings to the table, if you depart with him, it has to be of some significance.
Well, I would think that the Carolina Panthers thought the same thing about Christian McCaffrey until they found out that the best we can get is a second, third, fourth this year and a fifth next year. Howie Roseman he offered a deal for Christian McCaffrey. It was a third-round pick, straight up. So,
right.
I don't know if Howie's going to part ways with that first rounder, but he is offering a second and Quez Watkins, from my understanding. Maybe they sweeten the deal and add Andre Dillard. Do you still not like that deal? You get a guy who could start at tackle, a wide receiver, and a second-round pick for Alvin Kamara. And you do have to factor in now, what is the deal with this legal situation? Because I remember in the preseason or training camp, we all thought he was supposed to be suspended for like the first 6 games. The ruling never happened. Obviously, I don't have my finger on the pulse with the whole situation like you do, but a ruling never came. It looks like the NFL kind of kicked the can down the road. Is a suspension inevitable next year? What is exactly going on with his legal matters?
Yeah, the legal matters are as such. What we do know is that the attorneys have pushed the hearing back in Las Vegas. So I think the hearing is set for sometime in November now. It was an extra 45 days. They may try to push it back another 45 days. So that would give Alvin Kamara, as well as the Chiefs cornerback, enough time to be able to get their ducks in a row and possibly come to some sort of settlement with what's his name, Mr. Green. So now what has happened since then is that Green and his team, who is Tony Busby, the attorney that was also a part of those 23 women from Houston, Texas, against Deshaun Watson, now he represents Mr. Green, and they have filed a legal civil case against Alvin Kamara for an amount of up to $10 million. So right now, Alvin has a civil case pending, a legal criminal case that's pending. We don't know where the two will meet or how he's going to be able to deal with both. Now, Alvin Kamara, no doubtedly, is a leader in the New Orleans Saints locker room. And it's kind of perplexing to me after going 2-5 that he was the only one to finally stand up and speak out to the team. And I was wondering what happened to the other leaders like Cam Jordan as well as Demario Davis, that they had not really taken that aggressive approach to do so earlier, because I know those two guys and they are upstanding and really quality people. So yeah, it was weird. But anyway, this is where the Saints are right now. Do you keep Alvin Kamara? You love to keep him. Just like you say, Christian McCaffrey went for a lot less than I had anticipated as well. But at this time, the Saints are not very hard pressed into doing the deal unless they fall to the Raiders, and it could become one of those fire sales.
Well, that's interesting because this weekend's game maybe could ultimately determine the fate of Alvin Kamara, who, to your point, he's the one that stood up in the locker room after the game and said, we're not playing Saints football. And a lot of people thought it was a little bit strange to come from a running back, not something you typically see in terms of the leadership role on any team. A lot of that stems from maybe the lack of identity at quarterback. I mean, it seems like the Saints don't even know who their quarterback should be. One week it's Winston, another week it's Taysom Hill, the next week it's Andy Dalton. I mean, what the heck is going on at the quarterback position there?
Man, Rick, that's a perplexing situation right now. And let me just say this one point. As far as the leadership is concerned, I think it was more perplexing from that standpoint because I know those guys in that locker room are what you call the stand-up type of guys. And the timing is what I had questioned about. Why did it take so long? Okay, now let's talk about the quarterback situation as a whole. Andy Dalton, we know from his days at the Bengals, Bears, and Cowboys, he usually has good games and he can have some bad games and he can have some uneven performances as in a season. That's why he hadn't stayed with the Cowboys and hadn't stayed with the Bears. Let's just be honest about this. Is he performing well? He's performing well enough in the opinion of Pete Carmichael as well as Dennis Allen at this time. The concern I have is that after game one, I was in the press box in Atlanta watching how Jameis Winston, the second half of that contest, was allowed to become Jameis Winston, and brought the Saints back to win 27-26 over the Falcons, right? I think he was constrained again in the Tampa Bay game as well as the Carolina game, but it makes sense now why he was constrained. He was injured, 4 fractured vertebrae. Not only that, Rick, we've just learned recently from a source that he also had a torn tendon in his foot. So therefore, you have a quarterback who's trying to throw the ball and trying to push off, and he needs his feet to push off, to get the torque, right? So therefore, he was battling through these severe injuries that affected his performance. Because if you look at some of his passes, especially the first interception against Tampa Bay, it was clearly off, and it was off by a mile. And it wasn't just because it was a type of Winston interception. It was something that was wrong with the mechanics, as well as his downfield passes, which he excels in, were off target most of the game. So I think Winston tried to battle through these injuries, but I think some people have questioned why was he on the field for those 2 outings instead of put on IR to be able to heal earlier in the season.
Yeah, it's a shame because Jameis Winston is one of those could have been great players, but injuries just seem to have derailed his entire career. I had him pegged as the comeback player of the year the last 2 years. And there was this big plan like, hey, bide your time, learn from Drew Brees, a future Hall of Famer. This will be your rodeo to, go to town with. But it just hasn't panned out that way. And
well, look, let's be fair to him as well. Torn ACL is a severe injury, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's been able to bounce back from that and really get into training camp healthy as far as the ACL was concerned. I think he had a nagging hamstring injury that prevented him from being out there for a couple of weeks during the training camp period, which kind of retarded some of the progress of the Saints offense, in my opinion. Sure. But Andy Dalton has been there to service the Saints as the backup, and he's been there through the preseason, and that's why they brought him in as an insurance policy. And right now, I think Dennis Allen feels as though he's the best insurance policy, and he's performing well in his opinion. But Andy Dalton, we can't forget against the Cardinals, he had 2 pick sixes back to back in that game that really turned the momentum toward the Cardinals' favor, and the Saints thus lost in the end.
I see Dennis. You mentioned Dennis Allen. I see an organization who thought like, hey, we're just going to pass the baton here from Peyton to Dennis Allen, and they were under the impression like, oh, Drew Brees, we'll just pick up the pieces and be a contender, but it really hasn't gone exactly to plan. Now we're sitting here week 8. This NFC South is up for grabs. Anybody could win it, but if the Saints lose this week and their season comes off the rails, will Dennis Allen be here next year?
New Orleans typically does not make rash decisions, and Mickey Loomis is very judicious in how he approaches if he keeps a coach or not, right? Think about it. He hadn't really had to make this major decision for 16 seasons. So I don't know is the best answer right now, Rick. And you would have to see how this team is able to respond the rest of the season. We still have, 10 games remaining on the schedule. So there's a lot of football left to be played.
No doubt. Talking to Kyle T. Mosley, SI.com, New Orleans Saints, HBCU. He covers it all over there. All right. One more trade proposal. I'm watching the chat room light up. How about this one? Second round pick, Quez Watkins, and Kenneth Gainwell. So you get a running back in return. Okay. You get a wide receiver, which they need, and a second round pick for Alvin Kamara. You doing that one?
That's intriguing. I would say that is intriguing.
So we're getting closer.
You're getting closer. Okay. You're getting closer. I don't know if that piques the ear of Mickey Loomis, but it's intriguing to me.
Right. Well, we'll keep our ears peeled. We've only got a few days here. I think Tuesday is the trade deadline.
Right.
You mentioned this Raiders game could dictate whether or not they do have a fire sale, and I'll get a prediction from you before we go, but are there any other players on the Saints roster that should be keeping their eyes on the waiver wire transaction that could be dealt here before the deadline?
Look, Saints have a deep roster of edge rushers, and Marcus Davenport could be one of those players that could be considered as tradable at this time. He's performed well at most times, and there's sometimes he's been injured that has kept his availability away from being on the field. Cam Jordan is a possibility,
Wow.
And look, right now when we're talking about an older team with the New Orleans Saints, they're one of the eldest teams in the National Football League. And if there's no possibility for those guys to really reach the postseason, I think they may have to consider how do we jettison some of these larger contracts as well with some of these top players. So those are some of the two names that come off of my head. That's a possibility for the Saints.
Some pretty big names that could be on the move. We'll see how it all pans out. I want to catch up with some of the great content you have flowing over at SI.com before we get there. Las Vegas is favored. I see 1.5 at New Orleans. How do you kind of see this game playing out?
That's a good possibility, right? And right now you're talking about another team that needs a win desperately to keep pace in their division, right? Both of these divisions are not runaways right now. The AFC West as well as the NFC South are really they're really baffling right now. Tom Brady and those guys just lost last night, and by the end of week 8, we could have all 4 of the NFC South teams at 3-5 if they win out.
Unbelievable.
But, can you think about that? Shoot. But I think the Raiders are a good team. I think that Waller's coming back, right? He'll be back for this game as well. He's been mending for quite some time, but I think they are pretty even all in all. The edge, I would still have to favor the New Orleans Saints at this time, especially with that dome, and to see how this offense can still perform. And they're performing without the top 2 wide receivers in Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry. Think about that. So it's a lot to really take into account, but it's about who makes the biggest plays and the least mistakes.
Yeah, I think Olave's been a little banged up too, but I got New Orleans at home, but it's a coin toss type of affair. It's funny because whoever gets to 8 wins first in this division might win.
Remember years ago we had the Seattle, what was it, 7-9?
Yeah, we had a 7-9 team. Yeah, I think you're going to see an 8-9 team get in there. With that being said, I see as we're on the air, breaking news: Tom Brady, Giselle announced divorce. We arrived at the decision amicably and gratitude for the time we spent together. Tom Brady holding his head in his hands an hour after the game, still fully suited in uniform after all the teammates had departed. I think the Saints fell to the Bucs this year, but they have previously owned them. I think they won like 6 in a row. We saw what the Panthers dismantled the Bucs. The Falcons, I think, even got the best of them. So, I mean, it's up for grabs. How do you see this division playing out ultimately?
Yeah, the first half of that Saints Bucks game, I was there in the Superdome. The Saints really had control of that game until fumbles and interceptions really cost them the game. You know, it wasn't a huge affair. It was just 20-10. So I think the Bucks have gotten by, and I think the when Carolina kind of exposed that offense, they had trouble dealing with the fast defense. And last night, when I watched the game with the Ravens, man, the Ravens just use a great ground attack to be able to put that defense on skates, and they just wore them down. Those defensive players were holding their size; they couldn't grasp for air. So I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and that offense really needs to get back into gear as well. But all in all, it could be an interesting season down the stretch where a cellar dweller like the Falcons could really surprise some people, you know. And you know, Rick, we've been doing this long enough. The healthier teams usually are the ones that really get to the postseason.
Sure.
And whoever can be able to get some of their major talent back into play, the Saints are a couple of weeks away of getting like Michael Thomas and a couple of those guys back. Marshawn Lattimore is still on the mend from an abdomen injury, as well as you talked about they just put Roby on IR as well. So they're down their top two corners. So you're talking about a walking mass unit right now in New Orleans. So I like what the Saints can do. They still have the talent, but after this game coming up, it's a pivotal game, all in all, for New Orleans.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Falcons. I think they'll have Kyle Pitts coming back at some point as well. So that's another X factor in this division. Hey, Kyle, we appreciate the time, man. Not only do you cover the New Orleans Saints, but you also cover HBCU over at SI.com. Tell our great listening audience at home where to find all your great content, Saints related, HBCU, what you got Pelicans on deck, where to find you. Hit us with the whole picture.
Yeah. Well, look, man, Rick, first of all, guys, Rick is a legend. So thank you, Rick, for having me on, man.
How much do I got to send in the mail, Kyle?
No, man, look, man, I appreciate you having me on and clarifying some of these rumors about that they are valid rumors going into play right now. But you can check us out at Saints News on Twitter, as well as cover HBCUs for HBCU Legends for SI Fan Nation. So you can go to at HBCU Legends, and you can go to our Pelican Scoop. We do cover the NBA for the New Orleans Pelicans at Pelican Scoop. So those are the three entities that I'm managing editor as well as reporter for. So just check us out and see what we could do. And hopefully I'll be up in Philly New Year's Day to see you guys flying high.
Kyle, hit me up, brother. We got to get down to the Ocean Casino Resorts. We got the Eagles pre and post game going down. We got the Dolce. If you need a nice Italian meal, we got you covered over here.
Yeah.
So definitely hit me up. And you've got the best Saints coverage, and you've got the best HBCU coverage on the planet. I mean, you've got it covered for everybody looking for that information. One last question.
And Rick, hopefully we'll see you again for HBCU Legacy Bowl. I'm on the planning,
most definitely. Yeah,
I'm on the planning committee this year. So just be there.
Yeah, I will. I love the HBCU Bowl down there, man. Had a great time. Saw a lot of good players. And I'm looking forward to with Shaq Harris and Doug Williams, what they're building down there. They're doing incredible things. I will definitely be down in New Orleans, but we'll get together on January for sure. And last question: when I come back on the Football Playbook Wednesday morning, when the trade deadline passes, what colors will Alvin Kamara be wearing?
Oh man, I would say this, and I know you're putting me on the spot. I think if the Saints lose and they lose in a really horrible fashion, we could be seeing Alvin Kamara as well as a couple other Saints players in different uniforms.
All right.
That's all I would say.
Well,
it's a strong possibility.
We'll be holding our breath. We'll be looking for that Las Vegas Raiders blowout to see Alvin Kamara and the Kelly Green.
But look, man, Who That Nation would have a lot to say about that. They still want him to stay black and gold.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Well, that's Kyle T. Mosley, man, hitting us with all kinds of great knowledge. Thank you so much for the time, Kyle. And
hey, thank you, Rick.
Make sure you hit me up when you're over here in Philly, okay?
Anytime, buddy. Thank you.
All right. There you have it.